While we are just about to start here, I want to extend a real warm and sincere thank you to all of our community and people who have been so supportive through the years, and particularly since the release of Plandemic 1 in 2020. It's been a wild roller coaster ride for all of us, and a wake-up call for all of us as well. It's been amazing to watch the unfoldment of reality before our eyes, and for most of us to realize that we have awakened into the reality of being in an illusion for so long, and understanding that a lot of our health agencies and professionals, and even those that are really in a position that have taken oaths to do no harm, have done exactly that. And the upside to this, there's a reason that I called Plandemic number 3 the Great Awakening, because we are truly in the Great Awakening right now. And awakening can be uncomfortable, and we don't always want to do it. As my kids were lying in bed today fussing about having to get up, they didn't want to get up. And a lot of us don't want to wake up, but it's required. It's a necessity at this point that we do wake up. There's a lot of upsides, and those upsides you have to find for yourself a lot of the times, because if you look to the media for that, you're not going to find it. And the reason for that is because there's a real concerted effort to keep us all divided, separated, dependent, and so it's very rare, and sick. And it's very rare that you hear the good news, the good stuff that's happening around the world. And so it's almost as if the entire plane is lifting, right? So you have the elevation of darkness, and then you have the elevation of light happening at the same time. So everything's intensifying. And as I always say, that when the darkness tries to take over, then it's our duty to shine brighter. And the doctors that I've been working with on this particular case, the measles case, are shining very brightly. And I've learned a lot from working with them and from digging into this situation. It's been a real eye-opener, and I would love to say it was a surprise, but not at all, because we've known for quite some time now that shenanigans are going to be ramped up, and that what happened in 2020 is going to happen again in various different ways, right? Particularly as all the fraud and corruption is being exposed around the world, it's pretty much a safe bet to assume that there will be more things that we have to deal with as this great purge is happening. And we're going to discuss one of those major things right now on this webinar.
Absolutely. And I guess, Mikki, what I want to share is, I think a lot of people tuning in know we were planning a webinar for about 2 weeks ago. And that webinar was going to be called The War on Your Health, and we were going to talk about the immune system and the importance of prevention and the importance of the product that we developed with Dr. Fliri, Fierce Immunity. And we were going to go through the myriad of things that we're all seeing, with what's happening with our food, what's being sprayed on our food, the illnesses that are happening around us. I've got people in my life that are getting the flu, and friends and people that I'm talking to that are encountering flus like they've never experienced before. There's been, now geoengineering is a pretty mainstream topic. We've got 28 states introducing legislation to stop what's going on. We all know what's going on above us. And then it's the constant threat of bird flu and measles. And so we were planning this webinar to bring Dr. Fliri on to talk about the importance of prevention and how to really begin to protect yourself from a lot of these bioweapons and assaults that are happening with our health. That's when you got a call.
I got a call from Dr. Richard Bartlett, who you'll all meet in a moment if you don't know him already. I will say that I've had the honor and the privilege of meeting and working with some of the most incredible forces within the medical industry over the past 5 years. And none of them shine brighter than Dr. Richard Bartlett. This man has become a really dear friend of our families. And the reason for that is because he has tirelessly helped everyone. So the moment that people started to actually feel the effects, those that were negatively affected by the rollout of the vaccines, a lot of them had reached out to me over the course of the last 3 years or so and admitted to me. They'd say, listen, I'm reaching out to you. I want to be perfectly transparent with you. I disagreed with you in 2020. Even one said, I hated you in 2020. And now I wish I would have listened to you, because I thought it was the craziest thing in the world to suggest that Anthony Fauci was an amazing human being and that the WHO wasn't this incredible institution governing our health, and the CDC and all these organizations. It just seemed really outlandish that you would suggest that all of these organizations were in some way corrupt. And now we're understanding that they were, and my wife and I are both injured. And we need your help. What do you recommend? Who are the doctors that you're working with that are developing remedies for these ailments? And so my go-to first call would always be Dr. Richard Bartlett. And he would answer the phone no matter what time, day or night. There were emergency situations where people were on their last leg. He's dealt with people that were being suffocated by ventilators in the hospital, that had been given remdesivir. He dealt with my family, my father, other people that we love very much that had all been affected somehow with the real crushing of their immune systems. And as a result, were unable to do what the body was designed to do, which is to defend itself. And I will say that everyone that Dr. Bartlett helped, which was everyone I asked him to help, and I don't know one person that has reported back that he would allow any money to be received from these people. That's the kind of spirit that this man is. True servant of God and of humanity. And he is what doctors should be. And Dr. Ben Edwards, who they are working side by side in the Lubbock, Texas area, West Texas. And Dr. Richard Bartlett called me as we were preparing for this webinar, The War on Your Health, and also to really discuss the upgrading that we've done to our formula with fierce immunity because it was developed just for these moments. And then I got this call and we had to drop everything because we are making a lot of movies right now. We're very busy. So if you can imagine just about everything that you can point to as a problem, you mentioned geoengineering, we got a film on that. Film on the poisoning of humanity. We have one that's going to be released to the world, which you've probably heard of by now, called Follow the Silenced. And just won the Santa Monica Film Festival. And all these important films. But I dropped everything. Matthew Guthrie and I, which is my directing partner, flew to Lubbock, Texas, drove an hour and a half to Gaines County, where we got to know the incredible Mennonite community that I've never had the privilege of interviewing or getting to know. And it was not what I expected. We'll tell you more about that as we progress in this webinar.
Mikki, we're going to bring Dr. Bartlett in to tell this story. I know he called you and your team flew there. You had the opportunity to interview with patients, families. There were families waiting for you all. As I understand it, they were not willing to talk to mainstream media. They wanted to speak.
So that's the call that we got. Dr. Bartlett called me and he said, listen, he said, the media, as usual, are hovering around these people like vultures. They actually snuck into the open casket funeral of the little baby who died, supposedly of measles. You'll learn the truth about that pretty soon if you haven't already. And they're doing everything they can to sneak into this community to get the exclusive interviews with these people. And one did. The Atlantic actually snuck into a funeral service and spoke to the father of the deceased baby and didn't identify himself as a reporter, got what he needed from him, and then wrote a slanderous op-ed about the baby dying of measles because the baby wasn't vaccinated. All a complete lie, as you're probably on to by now. And so Dr. Bartlett called me and he said, listen, he said, the family, the Mennonites don't go on camera very regularly. They've never actually really told their personal stories. And we have asked them to speak only with you in Children's Health Defense. And so I highly recommend that you get out here. And so we did. And I'm glad that we did because we learned a lot. And we have a film that will be released probably next week, maybe the week after, probably a 20-minute movie that will explain everything, and you'll hear it from the Mennonite themselves.
And you filmed interviewing the families and talking to the doctors, and you're going to develop a piece.
Yeah, we're working on that right now.
It's going to be one of the most important pieces.
Yeah, so we interviewed 20-plus Mennonite members, and mostly mothers, and got to hear what they're about and what they think about what's happening right now. And it was an eye-opener for all of us.
The other thing I wanted to just mention is that not only are we going to talk to Dr. Bartlett about what's happening and what he's seen there on the front lines, but he's also going to share what he's been using and the protocols that he's been using to treat his patients.
Yeah, so let's understand that also at the end of this webinar too, we're going to open this up for Q&As. We have some really great questions that all of you have sent in. And we'll do our best to answer them. We'll allow Dr. Bartlett and Dr. Anton Fliri, who you guys have already met in our webinars, both genius, incredible doctors, who will do their best to answer all of the questions that you guys have asked us. Because this is an ongoing situation, I'm not going to be careful by calling it a virus. I'm going to call it what it is, and that is a bioweapon. And my belief, after interviewing these families, and perhaps Dr. Bartlett will shine a light on this as well, that this has been manipulated and targeted towards a community that is a threat because of their natural way of living.
So let's do this. Even though we have doctors coming in and going to share treatments with us in terms of how they've been treating patients on the front lines, we have to read this quick little statement. So let me read this quickly and then we'll bring Dr. Bartlett in, okay? Information on this webinar is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. If you have or suspect you have a medical problem, we recommend that you promptly contact your medical care provider. Statements provided here, of course, have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. All right, should we bring Dr. Bartlett in?
Yes. Come on in, Dr. Bartlett. How are you, friend?
I'm good. Thank you for inviting me, Mikki and Chris. When I was asked by Dr. Ben Edwards to help with the measles outbreak, he told me a report that he had seen respiratory distress, shortness of breath, things that I don't normally expect with measles. And he said that he was seeing great results overnight with the budesonide, and he wanted me to come help. And that's how we jumped in at the very beginning of the measles outbreak in Gaines County, which is in West Texas, between Midland and Lubbock. And that's my neighborhood. I work out here in the emergency rooms. I'm an emergency room doctor. And so as soon as I got off a shift in the emergency room, I drove straight to Lubbock, where two of the children were in the pediatric ICU, had recovered from measles, and they were sick with respiratory distress. And so we were asked to help the family get appropriate treatment. So as a friend of the family, which is a term, I was invited into and escorted into the pediatric ICU by a father of the child. When the doctor came in the room, we explained what we learned during COVID with budesonide and inhaled steroid. That's $3 a treatment, inexpensive, readily available, safe enough to use on 2-pound premature babies in the NICU for 30 years without batting an eye. And we saw that it was overwhelmingly effective. Oxford University still says on their website, 90% of people with COVID would not have come close to a hospital if they would have been treated with budesonide twice a day. That's Oxford University, the oldest university in the English-speaking world since 1096, with 72 Nobel Prize laureates. So that's a reputable source. We went down there, talked to the doctor. He said, I don't believe it's going to work. I don't think it's indicated, but if they want it, we'll go ahead and give it a try. That child had been air flighted by helicopter from New Mexico straight to the ICU in Lubbock, Texas, pediatric ICU. After 3 nebulizer treatments of budesonide, the child was discharged home. She didn't go from the ICU to the floor like we usually do. She went home. And so I went to another child's pediatric ICU room as a friend of the family, and I talked to the same doctor. He was the same doctor. He looked at me, he was like, oh man, he was ticked. He said, you again, is what he was thinking. You could see it in his eyes. And I told him, hey, this family is friends of mine too. It's a small world. And, we're very interconnected, tight knit. And he says, all right, I'm going to tell them the same thing I told the other people. It's not going to work. I don't believe in it. It's not indicated, but I'll order it because they want it. That child went home too. And so that was the beginning of my experience in the measles outbreak of 2025. And since then, me and Dr. Edwards went to Gaines County, which the main town is Seminole, Texas, and that's where most of the victims are of this outbreak. We saw a lot of kids, many of them. What struck me was not the rash. It was the room full of coughing, shortness of breath, distress, a very dangerous situation for many of these kids. And it was happening at all ages. And by the way, some of the parents that were taking care of their kids had been vaccinated and they got measles. Yeah. And so that was one of the things that kind of got uncovered is you might get measles even though you're vaccinated. We have evidence of that. Mikki, I think you got that in your documentary coming up.
We did. As a matter of fact, the lion's share of the people that we interviewed, of the adults, I would say 80% of them were vaccinated that got the measles.
So here's what's still happening. They're still saying there was a measles death, talking about that 6-year-old that died of bacterial pneumonia. You can have measles and recover from it weeks ago, and then you could walk in front of a bus and get hit by the bus, and you didn't die from measles. You died from a bus hitting you. This child had measles, recovered from measles, and then had a secondary bacterial pneumonia with a bacteria that's commonly causing community-acquired pneumonia called mycoplasma pneumonia. That's atypical pneumonia. That's walking pneumonia is another term for it. And it's easy to treat if you use the right antibiotic. But this child was in the hospital for days, the one that they said was a measles death, despite the patient getting worse and eventually being put on a ventilator, had not been started on the right antibiotic during all that time. And so, of course, if you have bacterial pneumonia that's not treated, you know what the number one cause of death during the cowboy days in the 1800s in the United States? Bacterial pneumonia before we had antibiotics. Guess what? If you have bacterial pneumonia and you're not treated with the right antibiotic, it can be very dangerous and people can die. And so we had a preventable death. They're right about that in the mainstream media. They're wrong that it was the measles or a lack of a vaccine. The problem was it was a lack of an antibiotic for a community-acquired pneumonia in a timely manner. And so the evidence is there. I believe you might have some of that in your documentary, Mikki, but I just wanted to clear that up for everyone that's listening because it's still not being accurately reported in the news. And I have heartbreaking news that there was another child that just passed at 3 a.m. last night. And this child had, I'm not going to give any identifying information, but this child had been trying to recover from months from mono and mononucleosis, and then had chronic tonsil infections. The parents were working on getting the tonsils out. But this child had recovered from measles. And so therefore, I expect the mainstream media will call this a measles death. But again, there's more to the story. And so someone's immune system, getting your immune system tuned up, making sure that you optimize everything you can for your body to heal is ground zero. But we're dealing with things that, like you alluded to, Mikki, I'm highly suspicious. In Europe, they had 127,000 measles cases in 2024 in Europe. We only have 500, 600 cases in the United States, and they're saying, RFK, he's ruining everything. But he's not in charge of Europe, which has 127,000 measles cases in 2024, according to the WHO. He's not in charge of that. That's not his fault. And so, in my opinion, it looks like a misinformation, disinformation campaign to character assassinate RFK and the Make America Healthy Again movement. At the same time, there's a saying, don't let any crisis go to waste. That's what evil people say. And we had some evil people that eventually, one of them, I believe, was the mayor of Chicago, if I remember right, that was part of Obama's campaign that said that phrase. And that was in the news that he said that. Don't let any crisis go to waste. And so what I suspect is they're promoting a shot in every arm. And they're in a campaign right now to finger point, to name call people, call them anti-vaxxers if they weigh the information and they decide they don't think it's appropriate for their child to get a vaccine. They're just going to call them names. And so there are actually pediatricians that are firing the children as patients because they won't get the shots right now.
Yep. And one thing the media also tends to leave out of their narrative is the fact that 2019 here in America was the largest spike in measles cases that we've had in a long time, in many years. And here we are, everyone's freaking out about this when it's nowhere near what it was in 2019. Also, another very interesting just tidbit information to consider is that Dr. Birx was relocated to where?
Lubbock, to Texas Tech in Lubbock, the South Plains, in the epicenter of this measles outbreak before it happened. And I'll tell you, here's what struck me, Mikki, now that you mentioned that. This feels like COVID all over again for children. This feels just like COVID for children. Viruses come from nature. Bioweapons come from labs. When you said that COVID looked like it might be different, that it might have come from a lab, you were ostracized. You were shut off of all social media. And now we know that the FBI, the CIA, the Department of Defense spies, they call them an intelligence branch, and the Congress itself said that it came from a lab. And so bioweapons come from labs, viruses come from nature. And so if there was ever a time to tune up your immune system, to be prepared, to have some tools on hand at home for your family, this is that time.
And this is all speculation, of course. I'd like to always be clear with that. When you really dig into it, I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't later learn that there was some form of gain of function or serial passage that kind of spliced the measles in with something similar to COVID. Perhaps the intention is because everyone knows that there's an upside to catching measles, and that is lifetime immunity. And so people get together with measles parties and they spread it intentionally, not knowing that there might be a secondary situation that is actually the harmful and deadly part of this. And so that all seems very suspect too, like what a devious bioweapon that would be if that is indeed the case. I don't know that it is, but after what we've experienced over the last 5 years, I don't rule out anything anymore. As a matter of fact, as a conspiracy theorist, I'm really concerned that I won't have work to do any longer because all of the conspiracy theories have become true.
You're a spoiler alert is what you are. You're not a conspiracy theorist.
Right. That's right.
Dr. Bartlett, in our conversation yesterday, you had mentioned that this measles variant doesn't look like the typical measles virus that you've seen. You described it as something different. Could you expand on that for everyone here?
We know measles is a acute respiratory virus. It's a viral respiratory infection. But looking at the medical books, it wasn't what we're seeing right now, where it is very virulent. It, of course, is contagious, but the problem is this is not like what has historically happened with measles. We're seeing kids who, they're at the end of the measles, their rash is going away, and their oxygen saturation on their finger on room air is in the 70s at home. They're in distress. That's very dangerous. And this, by the way, is one of the childhood diseases. Still, measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, and then there's the fifth one called Fifth's disease. The reason it's called Fifth's disease is because of the other four. And so what we've seen is that the adults that get this measles, they're not in the same situation. They're not in the same danger in general as adults. And the children are getting hit with this in a big way. The adults are not. And so it's almost like this disease is targeting the children in a bigger way. I'll put it that way. And it is very dangerous. It is very dangerous. You hear chickenpox parties might be okay, but this is not chickenpox. This is very dangerous. And so I'm encouraging everybody to avoid doing something like that. Don't put your child in harm's way with this particular outbreak, with this particular problem. Remember, COVID was coronavirus, common cold virus. We never were afraid of common cold virus till something came out of a lab. And I don't know that this outbreak came from a lab. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's acting very different than anything we've ever seen before in the medical journals.
I'll tell you that out of the 20 some odd mothers that I interviewed, 100% of them reported that their child went from really sick. So I also want to be very clear that as you say this is dangerous, it's also very treatable. 100% of the mothers who had one child or up to 3 children who had come down with this measles all said that within hours, one of them said exactly, they said within 3 hours, my child was jumping rope. And as you mentioned a moment ago, when a baby comes in with less than 70% oxygen in the ICU, they usually stay for a few days. To be released the next day is very uncommon. And so every mother reported, they said it was concerning. And as soon as Dr. Bartlett and Dr. Edwards stepped in and said, this is the treatment, my child was up and around in hours. I think the most was 24 hours. And some of them were just within 1 to 2, 3 hours later that there was an immediate improvement and they were up and around again. So we also don't want people to panic because that's what the media wants, right? They want everyone to panic. But these remedies, these truly safe and effective remedies are available. And we're going to give you, during the seminar, we're going to give you a list of where to get all of these. We have developed an easy way for you guys to find all of them. You can find them on your own, but we put them all together in one list. And we have links to the various companies that we're not associated with, but that we know offer the best solutions that with Dr. Bartlett's help, really his list, that we have compiled here to make it easy for you to have these things on hand, because it really is important if this thing does get out of hand. And don't forget that in 2020, when Bill Gates, sitting next to his then wife, who was smart enough to leave him, said, you can see the disappointment, right? We gave it our best shot and it didn't really work. but they're going to really pay attention to the next one. When someone like Bill Gates says that, when people at the World Economic Forum at Davos, who is happening right now as we speak, are saying things like, there's going to be a major shakeup this year that's going to change everything, and we're going to get the power back. That's what people are speaking into. We have to be aware and understand that there's other plans. There's a reason I called the movie Plandemic. And in the beginning, that was the biggest pushback I got. People said, look, I trust that there's malpractice, that there's getting it wrong, but you can't tell me this was planned. And I understand that it was so difficult for people to understand that they assumed that there was this big conspiracy and all the hospitals and all the nurses conspired to do this. That's not how it works. That's why Plandemic 3 was about collectivism. Because what happens is when you get involved in the hive mentality, in the group think, then suddenly doctors who really know what they're doing will surrender to their superiors because they have been trained for 4 to 12, maybe 20 years in government-funded institutions, learning that anyone with higher ranks than them knows more, and to follow the authorities. Paul Offit wrote a big op-ed about me. And when I challenged him, the reply was, you think you know more than me? I'm a scientist, you're a filmmaker? And my reply to that is, maybe, in this particular case, only because sometimes you can be too close to a subject to see it. And so the people that got this right immediately, and I know because I've been all around the country interviewing people, were typically people like farmers. When I would say, how did the Mennonite know? We don't watch TV. We have our hands in the soil. We know how to take care of our bodies. We know when we're sick. Why would we get tested? Because we are in touch with our body. And then we have our home remedies, and we go to the hospital on very rare occasions. There is a time and a place for it. I always like to say, look, I have cadaver parts in my right knee from a motorcycle accident. What a miracle that they were able to remove a part from a dead man and put into a living man so I could do sports again. So I'm a lover of Western medicine when it works that way. But what we have beyond that is out of control, and it's the reason that malpractice and doctor mistakes are the #3 killer of the human body in the world. And so the beautiful thing is we are on the path, thanks to Robert Kennedy and everyone else who's stepping up right now, and the incredible doctors, Dr. Fliri, who you'll hear from very soon, are doing everything in their powers to correct the system so that doctors once again can honor their vow to do no harm.
Let's talk about some of the protocols and some of the remedies.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's dig into the remedies right now. Yeah. So now we have a list here typed out. I don't know if you have that in front of you, Dr. Bartlett, because it'd probably be better coming straight from you.
Yeah, Dr. Bartlett,
Okay.
we'd love to hear what you're using, what you're treating. I know everyone here tonight is tuning in to hear how they can get prepped for if, God forbid, this does get out and their children get sick. What should they have on hand? What have you been using? What have you seen that's effective? Could you give us your treatment protocol? And
Yes.
I know budesonide, but also there's other products you've been using as preventative. So I thought maybe we could go down that path quickly.
Sounds great. There's
Yeah.
prevention, and some preventive measures would be like using an iodine nose spray called Immune Mist. That's from immunemist.com. People can order theirs. I'm on the monthly subscription.
And Dr. Bartlett, I want to mention quickly, we've put all this together for everyone. So if you're going to immunemist.com right now, don't worry. At the end of the webinar, we're going to direct you to a page where you're going to have all this information, prevention and infection information. So it'll be all there for you. We've put that together for you all in one place.
So there's things we learned during COVID. We learned a lot in the last 5 years. We saw that the University of Cardiff in UK in the beginning of 2020 said, hey, look, mouthwash kills COVID in 30 seconds on contact. And so mouthwash will be a game changer for any viral respiratory disease, whether it's measles, COVID, flu, because we know when someone gets exposed to a respiratory virus, there's a prodrome period. The prodrome period is where it's multiplying exponentially in your nose, throat, and mouth for 3 to 5 days, and then it gets to a critical mass and you have symptoms. And so during that prodrome period, you can keep killing the virus down. And you might not even have symptoms if you'll do that. So mouthwash regularly, daily, and Immune Mist nose spray is iodine nose spray, which we use that type of product when we're going to do surgery. When we're going to cut someone open and give them the risk of an infection, we kill all the bacteria, spores, and virus on the skin with iodine.
And that's virus coming in on contact right away, someone breathing it in. So with children going into a classroom, a couple sprays in the morning, is that what you're talking
Yeah,
about? With
or
like
after they come home from school, after they come home from daycare. That would also kill whatever they've gotten in contact with. Budesonide nose spray. That has an antiviral effect. It also blocks the release of the inflammatory chemicals. It was a game changer for COVID prevention. And even if you get sick, it also will help with other viruses. And then budesonide nebulizer treatments. If someone starts to have symptoms of any kind, what we learned and was proven again for all the doctors that forgot, early treatment saves lives. Early treatment matters. It's easier. You can keep it boring if you treat it early. And I'm all about boring. I want people to not get excited with a disease. So budesonide nebulizer treatments, Oxford University said that 90% of COVID patients never would have come close to a hospital, and they still have that on their website. Think about that.
Yeah.
1.2 million Americans died with COVID. But what if 900,000 of them wouldn't have even come close to a hospital just with just the budesonide? Think about that. 900,000 would not have died during COVID if you do the math. 900,000 Americans died that shouldn't have. And based on what Oxford said, that's what Fauci said was just a placebo, but it's a game changer. Now, I expect bird flu that we've been primed to be scared of for 2 years now. When that happens, there's a flu medicine called Zofluza. It's one pill, one and done. And it is 10 times better than Tamiflu in my experience taking care of patients. When I got the flu 3 months ago in the ER from patients, I took that pill and within hours I was feeling better. It's like flipping a switch. And so I just throw that out there for the future. And then Tobradex eye drops. We know at the beginning of COVID, France studied budesonide eye drops against COVID. And they proved that it works. Why were they doing that? Because respiratory viruses come in through your nose, throat, mouth, and eyes. And so I'm throwing that out there just for you to know about Tobradex. And then there's fierce immunity to build your immune system. That's pretty much the plan. It's pretty simple. And an antibiotic. If you get a respiratory
I'll go ahead and jump in here. I don't know if you can hear us, Dr. Bartlett, but we'll go ahead and fill in for you while your video is recovering. One thing I wanted to mention too, because we're talking a lot about viruses and all of that, and a lot of people don't know, one of the jobs that I'm doing right now, based on one of the narratives of the films that we're producing, is really studying the etymology, the root meaning of a lot of these words that are thrown out. And I find it very fascinating that almost all of our language has been manipulated somehow. And there are real reasons for this. I remember in 2008, I was doing an event with a really intelligent, genius guy who wrote a 1,600-page encyclopedia for whole living. And he said there's a reason that all medications have 14-syllable names. He said because they don't want you to know how to pronounce it. Because the moment you don't know how to pronounce it, then you put your life in the hands of somebody else who supposedly can pronounce it. And so they don't want us to be able to self-care. And on that note, virus, original meaning of the word virus is poison. Original meaning of the word doctor is teacher. What doctors don't do today is teach. What the doctors do, Anton Fliri and Dr. Bartlett do, is teach. They have maintained that core principle that drove them and inspired them to do the profession that they're doing today. And so many good doctors are doing that. It's very important that we don't lump all doctors into the horror that we all just experienced over the last 5 years as being bad because they're part of a bad system. I have interviewed so many good doctors who spoke out, risked it all, lost the mortgages on their home because they were like, I will lose my license to save lives. There's a lot of doctors that did that. And so when we talk about these things as viruses, just bear in mind that it was identified at the very beginning of creating the name virus, that it was poison. So we are being poisoned from so many different directions. And I think we all know that right now. We live in a very toxic environment. Our soil, our meats, our air, our water, all of our food. And we're ingesting these toxins into our body at all time. And so I can't go deeply into this, but just know that I'm part of an initiative that intends to solve all of that with a bunch of, we now have people, very good friends in high places. And so it's an incredible opportunity that we're able to work on these new policies and treaties to create a system, a new system that will prevent the poisoning of humanity. We're working on that right now. And that is why 2 years ago, when we realized, and I started getting the calls, I actually started getting calls 4 years ago, which is why we made the movie that we're about to release called Follow the Silenced. I was getting calls from these people that were severely injured. They were the first ones to line up for the COVID-19 vaccines. And they were manipulated and coerced into doing that for whatever reason. We've been following them on their journey of healing for the past 4 years. They went from perfectly healthy to confined to a wheelchair, having to have breathing apparatus just so they can breathe, to having seizures every 30 minutes, some of them severely injured from being perfectly healthy. And so we've witnessed that firsthand. And that movie, when it comes out, share it like crazy, because I've been saying that's the movie that ends the debate. If you have family members, friends, whoever it is, that are still in denial, just because maybe they got vaccinated and they're okay, which thank God so many people are. My father and mother-in-law, both, 2 or 3 vaccines, they're fine. My father, 3 vaccines, 3 heart attacks, I just put him in hospice care. And so it just depends on the makeup of the person and the health position of the person. So with that said, too, this is why we created the Fierce Immunity. And Dr. Bartlett's back,
Okay.
good.
Okay.
But lo and behold, when we created this over 2 years ago with Dr. Anton Fliri, who you'll meet very soon, or you'll see him once again, this subject of measles came out. I believe he's an expert
He is.
in measles.
Well, he's an expert in prevention.
Prevention. And
He's one of the top medicinal chemists in the world, and that really was the beginning of the conversation. Was we were getting so many people asking us what they should do, what they should take, how should they build their immune system, because we know, and this is now, I think Tucker Carlson just did an interview, and the very famous physician that he interviewed said, it all starts with the immune system. You live and die with the immune system. And that was the real focus for us, is that if that's the case, then how do we support people, and who do we partner with that knows it better than anybody?
yeah, that's right. And welcome back, Dr. Bartlett.
Thank you.
So with that, why don't we bring Dr. Fliri in?
Dr. Fliri, we'd love
We'd
to see you.
Dr. Fliri, if you're out there, we want to go ahead and bring you in now. Yeah?
There he is.
Okay.
How are you, young man?
Pleasure seeing you. I hope you can hear.
We can. Good to
By
see
the
you
way,
too.
Dr. Bartlett is a physician. He treats patients. My passion is to understand life in the fundamentals. So my background is I have a degree in organic chemistry. I got my education in medicinal chemistry at combination at Harvard University with Nobel Prize winners, ETH Zurich and Wolf Prize winners. So those are the top laboratories in the world. And then I was working at Pfizer for about 30 years in cancer research and in neuroscience research. And during that 10 years, I started to wonder, do we actually understand nature, the way how we approach life and how we approach drug discovery and disease? Is that actually really how things happen? There's a degree of discordance with what we think we know and what actually is happening. And most likely a physician will experience that in the practice, because that many times when we actually approach a problem, the patient has a certain symptom or disease, and we come up with a certain treatment protocol, we have sometimes negative experience, actually more often than not. So anyway, I'm just cutting myself short now because it's an introduction. So my passion is trying to use science to help people. Okay, like a physician is using his discipline to treat people, I'm using science to help people and to actually create an understanding which actually bridges all different disciplines. That is what I am trying to do here. And I love Eastern medicine. It's extremely sophisticated, wonderful, experience-based medicine, which ultimately is underappreciated in its capability to heal and make systems work together. And that's something which is lost when you just look at linear thinking, where you think, I know how the gears work, but you don't understand how all of those gears work together. Medicine and biology is not about a single thing, it's about the collective, how the collective works together. And you have to fix when the collective is broken, how they can actually work them together. And that's what we do. So sorry for the lengthy introduction, by the way.
Not at all, Dr. Fliri. Thank you for that. We said this was going to be an hour, and I want to just be very mindful that we tried our best to keep it to an hour. This is a very hard topic to keep to an hour. It's such an important one. Dr. Fliri, can you explain for us the swarm intelligence, how fierce immunity, because that really is one of the top questions we got was, what should I be taking every day? What kind of supplement? How do I build my immune system? How do I protect my children? And how do I protect myself? Bulletproof myself? What is the supreme protector? And that's what I call fierce immunity. I call it the supreme protector. And it was really developed out of your technology, swarm intelligence, which mirrors nature as I understand it. And then maybe you can talk a little bit about just how those ingredients that you discovered build and really support the immune system and the natural immunity, so people can have a sense of what those 5 sacred ingredients are going to do in the body.
Okay, let's start out with what is swarm intelligence. I mean, you all have seen ants or bees in the way, and that's what they are. When you look at the single ants, they're very essentially, they are pretty mobile, but they're not very intelligent. But when you put them together, they can do marvelous things. They can construct buildings, they can wage war. So it's really then the collective, when they work together, when they actually start to figure out how to cooperate. The cooperation creates something which is called swarm intelligence, where they hold different ants together, it's a swarm, and they hold different bees together, it's a swarm. So the collective behavior of cooperation and changing information and using the information to cooperate, the result is swarm intelligence, because it allows them to solve extremely complicated problems through cooperation. Okay? And that is really the heart, and that's how biology works, how nature works. Because when we get sick, a lot of things have to work together. And when just a few things stop working together, there's a problem. And so ultimately, that's really the origin of our problems, is we don't understand cooperation. And so we understand the mechanics, and a lot of the modern science has focused on single mechanics, but not on the behavior, how those things cooperate. So swarm intelligence helps us to understand how nature talks to each other, how things cooperate, and then through that understanding, what has actually happened when the cooperation breaks down, get a better understanding what happens when the immune system breaks down. How does viruses, bacteria manage to get around this formidable barrier that nature designed over eons, and thousands of years, actually millions of years. Okay? How does it manage to escape that? That happens with cancers, happens with infectious diseases, all different types. But it's really a way of how we can actually fix broken corporations. That's what our technology is doing. In order to do that, we actually don't look at the proteins as single ants, but we actually look at them as swarms. And we use the things which are called protein swarms to figure out is how do they cooperate in every single tissue in your body. When you get sick, for example, when a certain virus invades you, how does that affect the communication in every single tissue? And because we can do that with essentially computer algorithm, we can review millions and millions of publications, for example. We can look at the entire protein, all of these different tissues simultaneously. And then we can figure out what is happening. How does essentially the immune system breaks down when you get cancer, when we get bacterial infection, when you get viral infection, measles, COVID-19, long-COVID. And then there come some rules, because it's like a warfare. The bacteria and the viruses and the fungi and that they wage war for millions of years against us. So there's a really in that lessons learned. The enemy learns how to bypass the defense, and the defense adapts how they can actually become a better defender. And when you know in that what our rules essentially make you vulnerable, then we can ultimately create something to support our immune system. And fierce immunity is designed to do exactly that. It gives you the flexibility, because when the whole healing process is in stages. It starts out with inflammation, which is actually a good thing. But when you have overinflammation, you have a problem, because you need to be able to keep the balance between firefighting, extinguishing a fire, and then ultimately rescuing and repairing. Okay? Fierce immunity, it allows you to keep the dynamic alive, to keep the flexibility alive. That's what every single ingredient there, and the functionality is all about. Let's help them to cooperate. Okay, that's at all of the different stages. So that's in a nutshell what swarm intelligence does and what the end goal is. End goal is figuring out what is in a cooperation network, what is broken, and how to fix it. And that's what Eastern medicine do, okay, to a large extent, because they don't look at a single component, but they're actually looking at it, how those components interact. And that is real difference between treatment protocols and also the way how you approach medicine.
Thank you for that, Dr. Fliri. Thank you for that explanation. It's incredibly fascinating. I know we can go deeper. I would tell you that, and we can all attest for this, we've got a large community out here. Everyone is taking fierce immunity daily. We've been hearing truly remarkable, miraculous stories from all over the world. We've been hearing about people who have been on inhalers and in 5 days they're no longer on inhalers. We've been hearing from people who have had bone issues and pains in their body that have gone away. A friend of mine, his sister had breast cancer, stage 4, and started taking fierce immunity, and within about a month they said their tumors are shrinking. And she said, I've never felt this good. I've been through this treatment and I feel better than I felt in months. I'm sleeping. I feel my life coming back. Nobody I know that's taking fierce immunity is getting sick. So I'm not making any claims. What I'm saying is that's the kind of experience we've been having with this miraculous formula. It is a supreme protector. And it is all because of your genius, Dr. Sharma's genius, the technology that you developed, swarm intelligence, the trillions of data points that went into discovering how those ingredients interact in the body and what they do and the extraordinary things they do in the body.
I want to ask Dr. Bartlett a question.
Please,
real quick.
yeah.
Dr. Bartlett, I just want to, before we go, because I want to make sure that people have everything that they need. And so you read off a really powerful list of stuff. I just got confirmation, by the way, from Dr. Edwards today that it has now spread into the Lubbock area and that this thing continues to spread. What you don't want to do is to need it because there's an emergency in your household and then be in a rush to try to find all these things. And so one thing that we haven't really made clear too is a nebulizer, correct, Dr. Bartlett? There's a purchasing of a nebulizer, which you can get at CVS or any pharmacy or Target, and they're probably $50 or less, something like that.
Right, around $50.
Yeah, and so have that on hand because should this strike up at midnight when everything's closed, you want to be able to have that right away. Is the budesonide the only thing that it requires a prescription?
So when someone ends up with, in this situation, this measles outbreak, where 1 in 20 historically will end up with a secondary bacterial pneumonia, you need antibiotics. Antibiotics, in particular, if you're not allergic to a Z-Pak or clarithromycin, which is what I prescribed during COVID, that is the best choice, in my opinion, for children. Adults could use Levaquin, but I think clarithromycin is safer. And so the antibiotic needs a prescription. The budesonide for nebulizer treatments at this moment needs a prescription. You can get a nebulizer online without a prescription. If you try to get it at a chain pharmacy, they are acting very obnoxious right now and requiring a prescription all of a sudden after 5. That was not the case before COVID, by the way. You didn't
Wait
need
a second. A prescription for a piece of machinery?
You heard me right.
No medicine involved, a piece of machinery.
Patients were able to pick up nebulizer machines in the past without a prescription, but now I'm telling you, go ahead and get them online because you can get it without a prescription there, have it in-house. And there are shortages of nebulizer machines in the chain pharmacies even now. There are shortages that are running like rolling brownouts where you have shortages of budesonide during this winter at many chain pharmacies. So having it on hand is a good idea because when you need it, you don't want to wait 3 days for it to come in. And also get a pulse oximeter, the little device that you put on your finger. You can buy that for $40 or $50 at any pharmacy over the counter. And that's critical information. You'll know your oxygen level and you'll also know your pulse. And both of those are useful pieces of information. So get a nebulizer machine in-house, get a pulse oximeter. And what we're seeing with this measles outbreak, which we did not anticipate, is the need for supplemental oxygen. And that requires a prescription if you want to get a oxygen concentrator, like you see when someone has emphysema, they have oxygen that they're on all the time, they carry it around. And that is helping many people not have to go to the hospital while they go through this pause. If you wait 2 weeks to get treated, it might get more intense and you might temporarily need supplemental oxygen. And that's why many people were in the hospital for COVID because they needed that extra oxygen for a moment. And so if you can secure supplemental oxygen, that would be a good thing too. But having the nebulizer machine, having a pulse oximeter, budesonide requires a prescription, an antibiotic, clarithromycin, which comes as a syrup for children and babies, and a pill for adults. Having those on hand will be life-saving.
Okay. We just received a note from the little birds in the room here, and one of the questions I think people have is if they go to the hospital, we understand they need to know how to advocate for proper treatment. Could you share a little bit more about that, Dr. Bartlett?
Yeah, the short answer is if you go to budesonideworks.com, there is a patient advocate page that connects you to people who will explain things to you, explain your rights to you. Actually, the rights are written out. And the truth is, patient rights still exist in the United States. Many doctors and hospitals have gotten used to a tyrannical circumstance during COVID where they just assumed rights and patient rights were suspended. We're not in a national emergency now, so this is not legitimate. It wasn't legitimate then. It's even less legitimate now. So go to the budesonideworks.com and look at the patient advocates. That's a short answer.
That's fantastic. Also, Dr. Bartlett, I noticed in the picture that with you and Mikki in the interview, there was a picture of you guys interviewing. I noticed you all were drinking. You had a little can of
agro shot.
Because it's on the page and people are going to ask, what is that and should I have it?
Absolutely. Have that in hand. And that's something that sometimes you have to wait 5 days for it to be delivered. This has been a game changer for the kids that are low on oxygen. It was a game changer that I learned about during COVID. It helps with oxygenation. It helps with decreasing inflammation because it has hydrogen ions in suspension. It helps with energy. It decreases brain fog. Your alertness is like flipping a switch, and it's not an energy drink.
We've been using it. We've been using it. It's fantastic. And I hear the hydrogen molecules pass the blood-brain barrier, and they do all kinds of great things for you. It's very noticeable. And so I wanted to make sure we mentioned that because it is going to be on the page.
Very good.
Bet.
Let's go to some questions now because we have the doctors here. Very valuable time of theirs that we can. Oh, we have the questions here.
We have them
fantastic.
right here.
Okay, cool.
You bet. We had over 700 questions submitted, so we're going to go through all 700 tonight. If everybody's like,
great.
I'm just kidding. We picked some out, and Mikki, you want to choose a few of those?
Availability of vitamin A and budesonide take care of the measles cases and stop the hysteria.
We started with vitamin A early. We started with cod liver oil, high in vitamin A, vitamin D, and that was not turning the tide. What turned the tide, which shocked Ben Edwards, who went through great lengths to bring cod liver oil from an excellent distributor of natural products out of Scottsdale, Arizona, and flew it in on a private plane. That did not turn the tide on this. This is not acting like measles in the books. Let me say that again. This is not acting like measles in the books. And so we did not see a big improvement with vitamin A, but we did see a big improvement when we used tools like budesonide in nebulizer treatment form. And actually the patients, after those patients got better in the hospital out of the ICU, other patients in the ICU were also receiving budesonide. That was a game changer. So I would not put my life in the hands of vitamin A with this outbreak.
Okay. And Dr. Fliri, I remember back when we were in the original talks regarding the development of fierce immunity, and we talked about the 500 degenerative diseases that this positively affects. Measles was on that list, high up on that list. And I remember thinking to myself at that time, that's not one of the important ones because we won't be dealing with that again. So let's focus on the other ones. But here we are. And so what is it that Fierce offers that might help people understand what their body needs to overcome at least this form of measles?
There is at least 3 components. So essentially, all of those viruses, particularly coronavirus and measles virus, they damage the immune system in a big way. So in a way, you can call them immune diseases. Fierce immunity strengthens the immune system in many different ways. Part of the weakening of the immune system is that those viruses induce a thing which is called senescence. So they make the cells old. They also make the immune systems old. So what you need to do is you have to get rid of those old immune cells. Because when you have old immune cells, they create things which are inflammation. Inflammation is a deadly killer. So essentially, aging and inflammation together accelerates how you get old, but they also weaken your immune system. So what Fierce is doing, it slows down inflammation. It's a very powerful anti-inflammatory. It also essentially slows down the inflammatory responses. And then on top of it, fierce immunity creates a natural defense pathway. So those things are called catalycidins, so those are the natural broad-spectrum antibacterial, antiviral. So by the combination of vitamin D with arginine, with a very powerful factor here, in essence, which produces those natural defense peptides and defense molecules. So the combination now, when you have something which kills bacteria, kills fungi, kills viruses, slows down inflammation, slows down the aging process of the immune system. And it gives you a health support because that ultimately will not only fight infections, but it also will fight a lot of the inflammatory diseases. Also in COVID-19, long COVID, those neurological problems we have, those inflammation-induced neurodegenerative diseases. Fierce immunity stops that. And the way we have analyzed that, we looked at 5,800 different diseases, including 93 cancers. And so fierce immunity ultimately is a really very broad health support system. And this is designed in terms of giving you enough that you can take it daily. The danger with a lot of the supplements is they give you too much vitamin D, for example, and too much zinc. Too much vitamin D in the long run can induce fibrosis of your heart and your liver and your lung. So you have to always be careful how much you take for how long period when you have a health support product.
Dr. Anton,
yes.
May I jump in real quick? We're getting a lot of questions from people in the chat. We did reach out before the webinar over the last couple of weeks. We've been reaching out to these companies, Immune Mist. Obviously, we know the fierce immunity people really well. We did reach out to HydraShot. We secured discounts for everybody here. We wanted to do our best to get everything to everyone as affordably as possible. So they were all very generous. At the end, in just a couple minutes, we're going to give a couple links where you can go. And there's links to every one of those products with the discounts built in. So we put all that together for everyone. So I just want everyone to know that.
I wanted to repeat something that I've said on previous webinars, but for those tuning in for the first time, one of the many things that Dr. Anton Fliri has taught me that was really a game changer for me understanding at my age. I used to take just a fistful of supplements every single day. And once I learned from him that what I used to do, I would go to GNC or whatever it is, and I'd turn the bottle around, I'd look, oh, vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin C, vitamin C. Wow, this is the best because it's got everything in it. And he was very quick to educate me that most of the things I was taking was actually doing nothing. It was being stored in fat, urinated out, whatever it might be, because a lot of these ingredients will actually cancel out the other one. And it's about the exact formula that makes these things. So if you think about this in the form of, let's say you're making a stew, you can give that recipe to everyone in the world, and everyone's going to make a different tasting stew, because if you put too much salt in, the stew is ruined. You don't put enough in, and it's ruined. And so the formulation of medicine is a very exact science, and that's what Anton Fliri has brought to our product and has helped me understand. So when people read it and they go, oh, I can get all these at a store, you can, and you're welcome to do that. But are they put together in such a precise way that they're actually going to be effective in your body is the question. So I wanted to say that.
Everything is in balance, and it's really the balance. And you have heard when Dr. Carson's interview, listen to it, and ultimately it's all about the balance. So when you have a seesaw, if you put too much on one side, then you lift it and it doesn't come down. In the innate immune system, you have to be able to switch back and forward because inflammation and healing are connected. You need to enable both processes. So you need to keep the flexibility. You need that oil, to keep things moving.
Wonderful, thank you. And for Dr. Bartlett, and I do want to say too, in case you missed this in your introduction, you're an emergency room specialist. And so we hear from a lot of doctors out there in the world that are making the rounds on podcasts and all of that. And you'd be surprised to know that some of them haven't seen a patient in 20 years. And Dr. Bartlett sees many patients every single day. You're on call. I learned this because as I tried to get your interview, it was very tough because you're on call 24/7 from Monday to Thursday or something like that. So around the clock, seeing people, dealing with people on the front line and knowing really what the people are going through. And with that, I want to repeat this question to you here. Should we stop all measles vaccines and let children get natural immunity?
Parents deserve to know all the information. That's called informed consent. And then they get to decide. I'm a doctor. I'm against street drugs. I'm against marijuana. And I know some people like it, but I'm against marijuana because of what I see in the ER. I'm against smoking. But I don't tell people you can't do that. My job is to my patients to tell them the risk and benefits and let them decide, because competent adults legally have the right to weigh the risk and benefits and decide what to do with their body. And it's like surgery. You can tell people, we should take your gallbladder out, and here's the reasons why, and here's the risk if we do it. You could die, you could bleed to death, you can have an infection. If we do this surgery, there's these risks, but here's the benefit. And so we're supposed to, as doctors, give informed consent. As far as vaccines, it's again an individual decision. Traditional vaccines made with a live virus or a live weakened virus make sense to me, but there's a risk. They're live measles viruses. Live measles viruses cause measles. And so what is not being told in the news, in the commercials that they're doing for the measles vaccine, is that you have a risk of getting transverse myelitis, encephalitis, measles, rash, high fever, febrile seizures, and you should not take this if you have any immune deficiency, according to the FDA package insert. This is what the FDA says in black and white on the internet. So everybody needs to read that, weigh it out. You have a risk of every disease, every risk of measles can happen with the MR vaccine. And you're not going to hear that on CNN.
Thank you.
That's right. Listen, we have a lot of people asking where they can go to find this information. So I'm going to share that information, and then we'll say our goodbyes, and then we'll wrap up. So if you want to get fierce immunity, our website is getfiercenow.com. And we've just launched our new formula, actually today. And we've upgraded everything. We've upgraded the ingredients. We've upgraded the hesperidin. Dr. Fliri could tell us all about this incredible anti-inflammatory hesperidin that's in the formula. It's been upgraded from a powder to a natural extract to a pure extract. And that's available today. So we want you to share this with people. And so we're going to do a buy one, get one. We've never done this before. This is a first, buy one, get one. So that's on our 1 bottle, 3 bottles, and 6 packs. If you go into the checkout and just put in quantity 2. So if you go in and choose the product you want, whether it's 1 bottle, 3 bottles, or 6, and you just click 2 quantity, and there's a little plus there, and you just take it from 1 to 2, the extra one, if it's a 3-pack, the extra 3-pack will drop right into your shopping cart at no cost. And so that's what we can do for everyone tonight. I hope you take advantage of it. It's at getfiercenow.com. If you have any questions about that, reach out to our team. We're going to drop that link in the chat for everybody so you can take advantage of that. It's going to be limited. We will do a replay. If you have any issues with that, get in touch with us and we'll jump right in. Our customer support team is second to none. We'll get right to you. And then we have a second. So to get all of the protocols, go to getfiercenow.com/prepare. And that's where you'll see the preventative protocols. Everything Dr. Bartlett shared with you tonight will be in there with descriptions and links. And then there's the infection protocols. If anyone you know has this, or you believe they have this infection, you'll have that information right there. We'll keep that page up. That's not going anywhere. But it's getfiercenow.com/prepare.
Now, can people share this? How will they be able to share this with people that weren't able to make the live?
That's what we're hoping for. You can share this. This is such vital information. It's such important information. So please share it. And then, of course, the piece you're going to be developing, we'll be sending out across all our channels.
If you haven't signed up for our newsletter, that's at plandemic.com. Go there, sign up for the newsletter, because that's where we launch all of our latest information, all of our movies. That's where they're seen first. Sign up for our newsletter. We do an awesome newsletter every week with valuable information and updates regarding the progress of our work.
The first Plandemic was seen by how many?
I think we're edging towards 1.5 billion at this point.
So maybe we make that our goal. We get this out to more people across the globe than Plandemic. And that's why we said this is how we crush it. That's why we said that in the title. This is how we crush it, with the right information from doctors with integrity and huge hearts, and who are doing incredible work in the world. And we get this out to everyone we know.
On that note, I just want to say to the both of you, Dr. Bartlett and Dr. Fliri, really, God bless you for honoring your oath, for taking your brilliance and all of the years of intense, I'm sure, studying that you did to understand medicine the way you do and the human body the way that you do, and actually honoring your profession and never wavering from that. You guys stand as a true model of what the medical industry should be centered and founded on. And so it's a real honor and a privilege to know both of you and to work with both of you. Thank you.
Likewise, Mikki. Okay, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to at least bring some hope to the people. Our mission is to make people healthy and then to keep them healthy. And that's really our philosophy, using our knowledge to empower people. Okay, so here we are.
Wonderful. Any final words, Dr. Bartlett?
Yes, Mikki, thank you for using your skill set to get the word out and save lives. We're not helpless or hopeless. And it says in scripture, my people perish for lack of knowledge. But if you get the word out, which is what you and Chris are doing, you can save lives. Literally, people live and not die because they get the right information. So I appreciate what you're doing. And I know that you dropped everything to get the word out, the truth out. And there's very few sources of the truth about the measles outbreak. It is different, and people need to be warned, but they don't need to be afraid. They can just be prepared. Don't be scared. And I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you both.
God bless you both, and God bless everyone. Just want to send blessings out to everyone who's tuned in tonight. We're with you. Our hearts are with you. If anyone has questions, if anyone needs support, if you're a practitioner and you want to work together, reach out to us. Go to getfiercenow.com, go to plandemic.com, reach out to us. You will hear from us. Thank both of you. God bless you, and thank you so much for being here for us and for everyone who tuned in.
Thanks for tuning in.